Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Today, we're working out of your Social Studies Weekly again today. So just like yesterday, if you have not completed your social studies yet for the day and read George Washington, you need to pause this video and go back and finish your social studies, and then I'll meet you back here at ELAR. If you are still here, we will continue, and that means that you've already read that article one time. You will be doing a project, as you already know. You'll be doing the virtual wax museum this year. What you're actually doing is being an author of a biography. The genre of biography is from nonfiction narrative. Of course, biographies are always nonfiction. I brought 4 with me today. I am Malala. So the topic is Malala, and this is a biography. Another one that I brought is Jane Goodall. I also brought Rosa Parks, and I brought Nelson Mandela today. We're going to look at some features that we notice often happen in a biography that are important to a biography, and a feature you need to make sure as an author of the biography that you'll be writing soon, that you consider these things, that you structure your biography in a way that makes sense and that you use some of these features you might be interested in. One thing we know is biographies always use other resources. So whatever you research, you need to make sure you give those authors credit also in a bibliography. You'll need to make sure that you list all the sources where you got your information. Google is not a source. Google's more of like, if you picture yourself on a bus, you get on the bus, the Google bus, and it drives you where you need to go. And it gives you a list of websites that you can click and go to. The bus takes you to the other sites. The sites are the sources you need to make sure that you write down. Not only do we need to have a biography, but what else? What other things do we know is often, what other features of biography do we often find in those texts? Here's a timeline. You'll be required to have a timeline, not of every single time the person had their breakfast or walked into the front door of their best friends, but the timeline of the most important events in that person's life. Here we have a timeline of Rosa Parks' life, beginning with the day she was born, because a biography always includes birth and then is written in sequence or a sequential order through their childhood and then on to the important events that happen in their life. Another feature often found in biographies are charts or maps. I don't think I have a map actually. Maps are often found. Real photos when available. Now, if your character was born and died before the camera was invented, then it'll be more like a drawing, like you find in Social Studies Weekly. But whenever possible, a biography will include real photos and pictures and charts. Remember, there are also captions under the photos that tell a little bit about what the person is looking at. We're going to think about those features as we read from your Social Studies Weekly. George Washington, Gentleman, Soldier, and Patriot is the one that we will reread. Again, assuming you've already read this once, let's look at how the author structured this text. Let's look at the decisions that the author made when they wrote this and organized it. Because remember, writers organize their text in a way that makes sense for the reader. Looks like one decision this author made was to add this photo right here of a really important time, a really important event in George Washington's life. Notice that the author started with a hook. You remember, and probably talked about this a lot in 4th grade, that He wanted to capture the reader's attention with this hook. Do you know whose face is on the US $1 bill? If you said George Washington, you are right. So he started with a hook for the reader. Then we got some general information. After that, let's go into paragraph 2. This is when the author decided to start structuring in sequential order or chronological order. Let's look at the important events that the author decided to include in this biography. George Washington, and always start with the first and the last name. George Washington was born. So we hear about George Washington's birth, his family, where and when he was born. We hear about some events from his childhood. He was only 11 when his father died. We learned about his mother. So the author structured this paragraph by telling us in the order that it happened about George Washington's birth and childhood. Then we find out what happens when he was a little bit older as a young adult, a teenager and young adult. Then we move on to his marriage. That's important. His plantation in Mount Vernon. And then his accomplishments. Now, in this text, the author chose not to talk about George Washington's death, but you are going to make sure that you include that. And remember in your biography report, you're also going to say how that impacted the world, how his life or her, how your topic's life impacted the world, and the legacy that they left. And then also how their death impacted the world, like how the world reacted. That spot in your outline will be maybe a song that someone wrote because they were inspired by your person, or a monument that was erected somewhere in Washington, D.C. or whatever. Maybe some famous artist made a painting that that many people know about. So whatever you find that shows us how the world held on to their legacy and reacted. So in summary, just one more time, we want to look at the structure. We want to make sure that we include important text features such as real photos or drawings, because of course, George Washington wasn't around when a camera was. And then we want to make sure that we write a biography in the order that the events occurred, which is called sequential order. We also want to make sure that we include the bibliography at the end. And I'm not going to be picky about the structure of the bibliography. I just want to make sure that you give credit to the other authors that you researched. A timeline. You might want to put a graph. You might want to put a picture and then a little picture within a picture, like a magnifying glass, almost like you had a magnifying glass to look at it. That's called an inset, if you'll remember that from the last time we talked about text features. If you have any questions about your research project, don't wait till the last minute. Don't hesitate. Just give your teacher a call.